Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at the magical Merlin. You've heard the name, but where does myth end and history begin?
That's a good question, and it's hard to tell sometimes.
We've got tons of stuff to help us, though. Articles, historical texts. Where do we even begin with someone like Merlin?
He's been around for centuries, captivating our imaginations.
Okay, well, let's start with something easy. His name, Merlin. Was that even his real name?
Probably not. It seems to have come from the Welsh name Myrddin.
Okay, so Merlin became Merlin. Interesting. Anything else about the name Merlin?
Yeah, actually, it could mean a couple different things, like madman or of many names.
Of many names, huh? A wizard with many names?
Hmm.
That's kind of fitting. It almost makes me think that Merlin wasn't just like a simple translation.
Actually, you might be onto something there. Some scholars think the name Myrddin might have come from a place.
A place.
Yeah, a town in Wales, Carmarthen.
So you're saying the town's name might be older than the legendary figure,
Uh-huh.
that the place might have inspired the legend. Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how history and myth are all intertwined.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got this name, but where does Merlin first show up in literature?
Well, a lot of people point to Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Yeah, he wrote Historia Regum Britanniae, and in it he introduces us to Merlinus Ambrosius.
Merlinus Ambrosius. So is that our Merlin?
Basically, yeah. Although Geoffrey seems to have combined a few different figures, like there's Myrddin Welt. He was this wild guy in Welsh tradition, a prophet connected to nature.
So this Merlin Welt, he is part of Merlinus Ambrosius.
Yeah, and there's another guy, Ambrosius Aurelianus. He was a real historical figure, a Roman-British war leader.
So we've got this prophet and this war leader. They get mixed together with Roman stuff, and boom, Merlinus Ambrosius is born. It sounds like a pretty fascinating mix.
It is. It's a mix of history and myth and prophecy all rolled into one.
Oh, and then there's Merlin's dad, that whole incubus demon thing.
Oh, yeah, right. But that wasn't from Geoffrey of Monmouth. That came later. Yeah, Robert de Boron. He was a poet, wrote an epic poem called Merlin, and that's where the incubus demon dad shows up.
An incubus demon. What was Robert de Boron thinking? Was he just trying to make Merlin even more mysterious?
Maybe, but some scholars think he was trying to make a theological point, like Merlin was this potential antichrist figure.
Oh, wait, Antichrist.
Yeah, but the thing is, he gets redeemed through baptism.
So Merlin, this incredibly powerful wizard, he's born with this dark legacy, but he chooses good. That's heavy stuff.
It is, and it makes you think about how Merlin is always balancing between darkness and light.
Okay, so we've talked about Merlin's origins, his name, his father. But what about his role in the Arthurian legend? We all know Merlin and King Arthur, but what are some of Merlin's greatest hits?
Well, there's the prophecy of the two dragons.
The two dragons?
Yeah, a red dragon and a white dragon. They represent the Britons and the Saxons, and Merlin predicts their conflict.
So Merlin's a prophet.
Yeah.
He sees the future. What else?
Well, he's also the reason Arthur is even born.
What do you mean?
He helps Uther Pendragon disguise himself so he can be with Igraine, Arthur's mother.
Merlin's using magic to play matchmaker. That's a pretty big deal. He's meddling in the affairs of kings.
He is. And it shows how he's not just a wizard, he's also a political player. He's shaping the destiny of Britain.
And then, of course, there's the sword and the stone.
Yeah, that's a classic. Only the true king can pull the sword from the stone.
And who put the sword in the stone?
Merlin, of course. He's the one who orchestrates the whole thing. He's looking for a king who's worthy.
So he's a prophet. He's a matchmaker. He's a kingmaker. Merlin wears a lot of hats. It's like he can see the big picture, and he's moving things around to make it all happen.
Exactly. He's always a few steps ahead.
Okay, but we all know how Merlin's story ends, tragically, with the Lady of the Lake.
Ah, yes. The Lady of the Lake, or Vivian as she's often called. She's a powerful figure in her own right. And their relationship is complicated.
Complicated how?
Well, she ends up trapping him, imprisoning him.
We've heard all kinds of versions of this. A cave, a tree, even an invisible tower of air. Why so many different stories?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it shows just how much Merlin's story has been told and retold over the centuries. But one thing that stays the same, Merlin knows what's going to happen. But he can't stop it.
Or maybe he doesn't want to stop it. It makes you wonder.
It does. And it makes you think about the limits of power, even for someone like Merlin.
He's a powerful wizard,
Yeah.
but he's still vulnerable, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. I guess even the greatest wizards can fall in love.
I guess so.
This is fascinating stuff. But we're just getting started. We've talked about Merlin's origins and his role in the Arthurian legend, but what about his legacy? How has his image changed over time? And what does Merlin mean to us today?
It's amazing how Merlin isn't just stuck in those old stories. He's become like a cultural icon.
Yeah, he really has. We see him everywhere. But his image has changed over time, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. It's like he's constantly evolving, reflecting the times.
So how was Merlin seen in, say, the medieval period?
Well, back then, religion was a huge part of life. And
Yeah.
so Merlin, he was often seen as this prophet.
A prophet.
Yeah, someone who could bridge the gap between humans and the divine. His magic was like a gift from God.
Makes sense. He's guiding kings, shaping the moral landscape.
Right. But then we move into the Renaissance.
The Renaissance. That was all about humanism and reason. What happened to Merlin then?
He changed with the times. He became less of a prophet and more of a scholar.
A scholar.
Yeah, an alchemist, a scientist almost. His magic was less about divine power and more about understanding the natural world.
So he's still magical, but it's a different kind of magic.
Exactly. It's the magic of knowledge and discovery.
And then what about the Romantic era? That was all about emotions and imagination. How did they see Merlin?
Ah, the Romantic era. That's when Merlin really became the wizard we know and love today.
The wizard with the long white beard and the pointy hat.
That's the one. He became a symbol of wisdom and mystery connected to nature and the power of imagination.
That's the Merlin we see in fantasy books and movies today,
Exactly. He's become the archetype of the wise old wizard.
like Gandalf or Dumbledore.
Exactly. He's this mentor figure, guiding the hero on their journey.
It's incredible how Merlin has managed to stay relevant for so long. What do you think is the secret to his lasting appeal?
I think it's because he speaks to something deep within us. A longing for something more, something magical.
In a world that can feel very ordinary, Merlin reminds us that there's still wonder out there.
Exactly. He represents the search for wisdom, the power of mentorship, the possibility of finding meaning in a chaotic world.
He's a symbol of hope and imagination.
He is, and that brings us to a very important question.
So why should we care about Merlin today? I mean, he's a cool character, but he's from like ancient times.
It's interesting, isn't it? He's been around for centuries, but he still speaks to us.
So what is it about Merlin that's so timeless?
I think it's because he represents something we all crave: guidance, wisdom, a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, I can see that. In a world that can feel so chaotic, Merlin offers this sense of wonder.
Right. And he reminds us of the power of imagination, the importance of having mentors, the possibility of finding meaning, even when things are tough.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, even in this crazy modern world, there's still room for magic.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message.
Yeah, it is. But we've only scratched the surface here, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to Merlin, so many different ways to interpret his story.
I guess that's part of his appeal. He's constantly evolving, changing with the times.
Exactly. And he's full of contradictions. He's powerful,
Yeah.
but he's also vulnerable.
Yeah, he makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Love and love, he gets tricked.
Right. He's not perfect. And that makes him relatable.
Even with all his magic, he's still human.
And I think that's why he continues to fascinate us. He reminds us that we're all complex. We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
So what would you say to our listeners who want to learn more about Merlin?
I'd say keep exploring. There are so many books and movies and stories out there. Find the Merlin that speaks to you.
And don't be afraid to question, to think critically, to come up with your own interpretations.
Exactly. Merlin's story is a gift. And it's up to each of us to decide what it means to us.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of Merlin.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep seeking knowledge, keep questioning, and keep the magic alive.